And welcome to the VSA Capital Tech and Transitional Energy Podcast. And it's Thursday, the 10th of July. It's a beautiful sunny day down in Cornwall. It's probably a hot sunny day in London. And Phil's off on holiday somewhere. I'm not quite sure where he is. But I've got David Scriven, my head of sales. David.
It's a pleasure, Andrew, and it is roasting here. If we do lose contact, it's because they're working on an antennae outside, but hopefully we'll be okay. So we'll be, hopefully good luck with that.
No, I'm sure we will be. Anyway, there's a little bit of news out on tech and trans, but I think because it's you and me and the others, we might have a little bit of a wonder about the world in general, which actually a lot of it does lead to tech and trans. I mean, a lot of it is, why are we as VSA Capital so excited about this space and this sector, and why do we cover it as a bespoke sector, so to speak? I mean, so I think that's quite important. And I mean, I was going to just start back, and I know some people know this view, and I've been preaching it for about 2 years, is that a lot of my formulative thinking on the way the world is going is that basically we're at the end of Bretton Woods. For those that don't know, Bretton Woods was done at Bretton Woods. It was the end of World War II. And basically, America and the Allies had conquered the world, and they sat down and said, well, Japan, you can have your country back. Germany, you can have your country back. And everyone got their countries back. But on the grounds that America basically became the global policeman, there was global free trade, and that the US dollar was the global currency. And that was the sort of deal. It's lasted about 80 years. And basically, in my view, it's all over. We're now going into a new world. America is not over whatsoever. It's just becoming less of the global policeman, shall we say, and slightly more introverted. And of course, we have what I think some people would call the rise of the Middle Kingdom, which is Russia and China. But we know that Russia's got a huge number of problems. I mean, let's be honest, it can't even fight a war in Ukraine successfully, so it can't be that powerful a country. And all of its proxy wars around sort of the Middle East and Africa are pretty much going wrong. So I don't see Russia really as a threat. And China, clearly it is has been very successful and has grown amazingly, but it has its own issues. Its own economy has got a lot of issues that it needs to get over, of aging population. It's going through deflation and that sort of thing. And it's done a massive amount of work building airports and trains and roads everywhere. Now they're all built, and cities, now they're built, there's nothing else to build. So that's slowed things down. And there are a lot of rumors about Xi Jinping and, whether he actually will get round to a fourth term, or whether there's a lot of rumors about a bit of unsettlement, shall we say, at the top of the CCP. So I think one has to just look at the world like that a little bit and go, okay, so this is the new picture. I've run through it very, very quickly. I could talk about it for hours. And of course, you've also got India and Brazil, the BRICS, the other BRIC countries. But I don't think they're about to unsettle us. And actually, the UK in general, we are sitting in the UK, doesn't get hit too much by all this. A lot of this can go on around it, and we don't get impacted too much, so long as we play clever, what I call bamboo politics. But then there are a couple of big positives for the world, in my view, and a couple of big negatives. So the positives are basically AI and robotics is coming in, and that will be a fundamental sort of industrial revolution. And whenever you have an industrial revolution, actually growth and society benefits dramatically. And so I think with that, we can see a huge benefit in society and growth and the standard of living. We also have renewable energy coming in. Clearly in the UK, it's a little bit complicated because we have this complete idiot, Ed Miliband, who just hasn't got a clue how he was ever leader of the Labour Party, or even a minister, or even a politician. I do not know, because the guy is just completely hopeless. But we are heading, in my view, I've always said 80% SWB, which is solar wind batteries. And once it's in place, your cost of energy becomes almost marginal. And again, every time you reduce your energy costs dramatically, be it from coal to oil to gas and these sort of things, as we are in history, that boosts economies and the standard of living and the way of life dramatically. So that's a really big positive as well. So there's two big positives out there that should be making the world and our lives significantly better. There are actually two really big things that worry me on the other side of the equation. And I will tread carefully because this is an open podcast. But one is the rise of Islam, and it's changing a lot of the way certainly Western culture and Western society is behaving. And it is a big worry out there. By the way, for all of these things, I'm talking 20, 30 years. Frankly, at the end of 30 years, I'll be dead. So I'm just talking the rest of my lifetime. But I worry a lot about that. And I also worry a huge amount about general migration. I mean, we talk about the small boats all the time, but that's just a tiny, tiny part of it. The migration that is taking place globally is absolutely vast. And I mean, there's just, if you just look at Nigeria alone, the population of Nigeria has grown over the last sort of 30 years from 50 million to 350 million. And that country cannot cope with 350 million people. So, I mean, the World Bank, I think it is, or some big council, estimates that, for instance, 30 million Nigerians will migrate to Europe. That is an awful lot of Nigerians to come into Europe, and it will disrupt the status quo. So I see those as two really big worrying negatives going forward in the future. But as I say, the big positives are all to do with tech and trans, because it's AI and robotics and the move to renewable energy, which we will get there, not because it's renewable, because it's so much cheaper once you've got it up and running. And so that's my sort of how I see the world. How do you feel about that, David?
Well, there's an intro. There's an intro and a half. But picking up on your themes, Andrew, when you talk about Bretton Woods, the US, I mean, one thing is we've seen a softer dollar. And I think that one of the areas, as it relates to tech, is that just as you're no doubt aware, Microsoft made an all-time high this week. But the S&P 500 software index is at an all-time high. Now, we don't have earnings out there at the moment, and maybe the market is looking at the benefits from a weaker dollar. And also, to a large extent, I think it's an argument to say that they're sheltered from tariffs. I mean, fewer physical products are involved here. Additionally, Chinese export restrictions have been lifted on chip design software. So names like Cadence Design have been moving higher. Now, the other big theme that you talked about was AI, and you've also noted it's been in the press, of course. NVIDIA was the first company to make 4 trillion market cap this week. Now, put this into perspective, there are only 5 countries on a ranking of 2024 GDP higher than NVIDIA's market cap. So that was US, China, Germany, India, and Japan. But that theme that you touched on is very much in place, because we saw that TSMC reported revenue increases of 39% in the June quarter, which beat the street. And Taiwan Semi CEO said, demand outstrips supply. So AI is very much there, and that valuation looks like it might be here to stay. So very much in place. And then when you talked about clean energy, as you know, Mr. Trump had his one big, beautiful bill signed on July the 4th. Now, this, according to analysts, was better than feared. Investment tax credit phase out for 2027 will not apply to solar. Energy storage will be exempt, and credits in hydro and nuclear will be extended. So in the tech and the clean energy world, there are some positives there.
Yeah, look, I think there are actually a lot of positives out there, and the markets are behaving pretty well, really, considering all of the sort of disruption going on around the world. Of course, I mean, there's also at the moment, there is this, I'd describe it as a bit of a short-term change, but it is, again, the end of Bretton Woods, and that is, of course, we're all having to remilitarize. But that's because America said, we're no longer the global policeman. You've all got to do it yourself. And of course, that's having and we know that military tech is now vital. I mean, you're seeing that in the Ukraine war. You're seeing it, it's all drones and technology. And again, it's a terrible thing to say, but wars do speed up technology and bring along amazing inventions. And a good war often actually boosts economies. That's not a good reason to go to war, by the way. But obviously that is another factor that is taking place, but less of a we just need to reset. We've all, bar America basically, or certainly in the Western world, cut our defence spending too low. Now, of course, in the UK, we've done it because we've had to cut back on spendings just about everywhere because our benefit system is just completely kaput. And we have just too many people drawing money from central government, be it for benefits or pensions or you name it. And I mean, until you can reduce the outgoings, for want of a better word, you'll never solve the problem. And no one seems to, in government, be prepared to tackle that problem as we stand today. But you've got to tackle it. You can't just keep spending money. And this, of course, is what Western countries have basically done. They just kept spending money and have ended up with these massive deficits. And of course, a lot of what Trump is doing with weakening the dollar, putting in place all these tariffs, etc. It's all actually about trying to sort out the American deficit because it is way too big. And some of the moves he's doing really are there to try and reduce that deficit.
Indeed, and I think he wants, if possible, to get Powell replaced, and I think the market's beginning to maybe sort of price in lower rates going forward, which is what he wants now to go forward with. So and a number of ETFs have been out there tracking the defence spending and have done extremely well, and will probably continue to do so because the trend is in place, as you've highlighted.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, he does want to reduce rates. The reason you want to reduce rates, of course, because then the cost of your deficit comes right down. If you've got rates at zero, the cost of your deficit is basically nothing. You don't have to pay interest on it, so it can sit there and slowly be inflated away. And I mean, there is a good argument. I mean, I think obviously, quantitative easing and changed everything during the GFC. But we are stuck at the moment with these central bankers who say, I can't reduce interest rates just in case a bit of inflation comes in. Well, maybe though, if you want to somehow get rid of these huge deficits, maybe that's what you need. Maybe you need a bit of inflation to come through, get your interest rates right down, so that actually that helps your deficit situation. That would then help remove some of the problems of this too much spending, because basically you wouldn't increase the spending, and basically people claiming all these benefits, etc., they would actually be getting less every year because inflation would outstrip it. And that's one way of reducing that cost. So it's not a completely daft thing. I mean, clearly central banks all sort of went independent, God, what, sort of 20, 30 years ago, depending which country you're in. And maybe there needs to be a little bit more government interconnection, shall we say. What do you think about that, David?
Yeah, well, I think we do need more interconnection. We seem to be slightly going away from that. And I'm also worried about in this country that we're doing measures that tend to stop growth rather than encouraging growth. And that's what we need. And we need lower rates. We seem to be caught into a bit of a sort of vicious circle of keeping certain rules and at risk of stemming growth rather than encouraging it.
I mean, it doesn't get talked about. I mean, I think one of the problems, most politicians basically have no experience nowadays, sadly, of business life, or very little. They become career politicians, which in my view is a disaster. Every politician should have been forced to do a proper job, including Rachel Reeves, a proper job, not from whatever she was doing on the help desk. But yeah, look, if we suddenly cut interest rates by 2%, you could potentially see the economy absolutely boom, and then we wouldn't need all these additional taxes and things. That sort of hasn't been put in, I feel, into the melting pot of levers that can be pulled.
Yeah, I agree. We do need to reduce rates, but can't quite see it happening just yet.
Anyway, I mean, that's sort of, there's a few interesting topics there. Look, it's just me and David having a bit of a banter, really. So I apologise for, if you were hoping to get all the results that have come out of the technology sector, you didn't quite get it. But there's some interesting, as I say, everything I look at in the big picture, and why actually a lot of my own personal wealth is tied up in AI and robotics and automation and renewable energy, is because that is the big picture for going forward.
Indeed, and I'd just take you away from some of those things, but just a little quick observation. It'd be quite interesting to see how, back into the US sphere, how Amazon does, I mean, obviously a global company, to look out for its impact on its Prime days, which are probably due to come to about an end now, because some online merchants are saying they can't afford the discounts due to tariffs. So just keep an eye out for that. Also, one of the members of the Mag 7, because you're beginning to wonder whether the Mag 7 is becoming a Mag 4, because some are doing very nicely and others are beginning to slip away a little bit in terms of performance, like Tesla and to a certain extent Alphabet and Apple. But yeah, those are my sort of other thoughts that I wanted to throw in.
Are you trying to do a sort of a magnum there by numbers?
Yeah, exactly.
In this weather, that's what you need, a nice magnum. Oh, delightful.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, any other little thoughts from you, David?
No, I think that sort of ties things up, because it has actually been relatively light on news. I've scoured the sources.
Yeah, in which case, look, as I say, anybody listening hoping to get more on tech and trans, apologies, but hopefully that was useful. Hopefully people enjoyed it. And I don't think Phil's back next week. We'll just see. We'll see what's about and see whether we do one next week, David. But we'll make that decision next week, not this week. So anyway, very good. Thank you, David. And we may be back next week, maybe not.
Thank you.
This podcast has been produced and edited by VSA Capital. It is intended for information purposes and not as investment advice. The information is intended for recipients who understand the risks associated with equity investments in smaller companies. Please do your own research and do not rely on a single source when making an investment decision. VSA Capital may derive fees from this content and seeks to do business with the companies mentioned.